Chapter 10, Part 2. 24th of February 2019, 9:30 a.m. I've not been to church for years. The odd funeral or wedding maybe, but certainly not because I had any kind of faith or belief. I've always admired churches though, and places of worship in general. The love and care that goes into the construction and the upkeep of such monuments to faith should be applauded, I think. Two good qualities and noble values, whatever the belief. I woke with a spring in my step, no hangover from the previous night, just a vigour and an enthusiasm to carry on. Then it dawned on me that it was Sunday, a church day. According to Google, St Bede's Roman Catholic Church on Wigton Road has a service at 10:30 a.m. What an ideal opportunity to surround myself with her old friends or acquaintances for an hour or two. If I arrive early, I may even get to chat to a few before the service. It's only a mile or so from here. I can walk that and be there for 10. I can leave my bag in the car here and return straight after. I shall update you, Mr. Diary, on my return, and then we can make tracks back down the motorway. 12:45 p.m. I am running out of superlatives to describe my state of shock whenever I update you, Mr. Diary. This dead end, this pointless detour, this wild goose chase has turned out to be anything but. This chance visit to a church service has given me another revelation I wasn't expecting. Could I go so far as to call it a miracle? Certainly anything seems possible on this journey. Well, let's start from the beginning. The walk up to the church was delightful. A stroll through the city centre, past the cathedral and castle, and down the hill towards Wigton Road. Hardly a soul about. The city was just waking up. The sweet smell of baking biscuits filled the air as I walked by the Mactys factory and on up the hill. The receptionist in the hotel had told me I would enjoy the walk back more than the walk there, and I was starting to understand why as the gradient increased. By the time I reached the entrance to the church, I was flustered and a little hot under the collar. It was 10:10 a.m. when I arrived, and a few people had started to gather at the entrance, having claimed their car parking space early. Two older couples were talking to, who I presumed to be, Father Hayes at the door. When they moved aside, I approached him. He greeted me like a lost friend before adding, "It is always nice to see a new face in the parish." I asked him if I could have 10 minutes of his time after the service. "You can have as long as you want, and a cup of tea and a biscuit in the rectory," he laughed. "Just give me a few minutes to clear the crowd and I'm all yours. Just wait over there after the service." He pointed to a large house near the church. He didn't ask what I wanted or why. He seemed quite happy to welcome this stranger into his home. I already felt at ease. We shook hands and I made my way inside St. Bede's. I sat at the end of a pew 2 or 3 rows from the back and soaked in the atmosphere. The church, built in the late 50s, was impressive enough from the outside, but even more so inside. Pristine, high, white walls, with plenty of windows to welcome in the sunlight from outside. For such a big place, it was surprisingly warm. The altar stood proud at the front, with colourful murals around and above the organ. A smaller chapel stood behind, with 2 confessional boxes that would have welcomed many a person ready to unburden themselves of sin to the many priests who, over the years, have called this place their home. I wondered if Martha had much cause to frequent them over the years. The congregation walked, plodded, hobbled, or wheeled their way in, depending on their age or mobility. It struck me how old the flock were, more old ram of God than lamb. But they sang with gusto, they prayed aloud, and they laughed and nodded and shook hands in the right places. This was a ritual I was not used to, and I certainly felt like the odd one out, despite the welcoming smiles. Enthusiastically, the organ player started to play out the final hymn. I sat still while the congregation filed out of the church behind Father Hayes and the altar boys, one of whom stood out like a sore thumb. He must have been a similar age to the priest, and at least 15 stone heavier than the other boys around him. But, as if it was the most natural thing in the world, he sang, carried his candle out the door, and into the car park. I was one of the last out. I didn't want to interfere or get in the way. I sneaked out unnoticed and sat on the rectory wall while Father Hayes said his goodbyes, making small talk with the regulars. He noticed me and waved. "I'll be 10 minutes. Just got to close up and I'll be with you," he shouted. The fat, old altar boy led his young charges back in, and Father Hayes locked the door behind them. By the time he reappeared out of a side door, the car park had cleared, and we were the only ones left. He was dressed rather more casually now, and still looked every inch a man of the cloth. Well, you can just tell, can't you? Come on in," he said, brushing by me and opening the front door to the house. It was beautiful inside, well appointed, clean, bright, and modern. I wasn't sure what I expected, but it wasn't that. And as if he was reading my mind, he said, "I can't take the credit, young man. If it was left to me, there would just be a sofa and a TV. Margaret comes in 3 times a week and has this place looking like a palace. The nearest thing I'm going to get to a wife," he giggled. "So, my friend, what can I do for you?" Over a lovely cup of coffee, I told my story again. He listened, fascinated, just like those in the pub the previous night. I finished by telling him all about Martha and her friendship with Ernie, and then how the visit to the King's Head pub was the inspiration for a visit to St. Bede's Church. Father Hayes sat back in his chair and exhaled loudly. "That's quite a tale, young man. Brilliant. I'm quite blown away by it, and how it has led you here, to Carlisle, to St. Bede's, to me." Then he paused before speaking again. Maybe I can add another piece to your jigsaw. How it will link to your investigation, only you will know, but I hope it helps." He took another drink of his coffee and sat back in his seat again. "I knew Martha Lewis," he said. "I knew Martha very well. Sadly, I did not know her husband, Tommy, but I feel as though I do, having spent so much time in her company. She was quite a remarkable lady with a strong faith, let me tell you. Her faith helped her to overcome many of life's challenges, illness, loss, pain. She suffered an awful lot over the years, but she never lost her faith. She didn't lose her spirit either. She was a fighter. In later life, she was in constant pain. Sciatica, I believe. But she never missed the service, not once. She needed the church. I must admit I did not know she had suffered from TB and had to spend time away from home. That must have been hard for her. She found love, though. Tommy was her rock. They didn't have any children, but they had a loving and caring family around them. They knew they were wanted and they knew they were loved, and you can't ask more than that, can you, in this life? And then he hit me with the bombshell. "I met Ernie Grimshaw, just the once. He left quite an impression on me." I nearly fell off my seat. The butterflies in my stomach raced around again. You met him?" I spluttered, coffee almost escaping my lips. "I did," said Father Hayes, smiling. "Just the once. Come with me. I've got something you need to see." I followed Father Hayes through the house and out of the back door. A gate led out to the car park beside the church. He kept walking and I scuttled on behind. "That's the primary school there, attached to the church," he said as he walked, pointing to a large 1960s-style structure over the fence and across a field ahead. He stopped before reaching this fence and turned right. In front of us was another small gate leading into a garden, flanked by tall evergreens. At the far end of the garden was a large statue of Our Lady. In her arms she held the baby Jesus. I looked around. It was another memorial garden. I was making a bit of a habit visiting these places. He walked on to the far side, and beyond the statue of Our Lady, he said, "Read that plaque, there, under the tree," he said, pointing to a relatively young beech. I crouched down to get a better look, and I could not believe my eyes. The plaque read, "This tree is planted in memory of Martha and Tommy Lewis, from your good friend Ernie. You helped to make me the man I grew up to be. I could not have asked for more. Rest in peace. 2017." I was rooted more firmly to the spot than the tree. "And that isn't all," continued Father Hayes over my shoulder, still smiling. I couldn't speak to respond to what I was hearing him say, though I had so many thoughts and questions spinning through my head. "It wasn't just the tree he buried," he continued, with a further mind-blowing revelation. "Underneath that slab of concrete, beneath the plaque, Ernie dug a hole and placed a small metal box inside. He covered up the box again with the soil and carefully placed the stone back on top. Now it hasn't been touched since, and I've no idea what's inside it. No idea at all. I wanted to pull up the stone there and then and dig in with my bare hands. Answers could be buried right there." But, as if sensing my excitement and urgency, Father Hayes spoke again. "Paul, I want you to continue your adventure and your quest. That box will still be here when you get back. When Ernie buried it, he indicated to me that I would know when the time was right for it to see the light of day once again. I don't think that time has been reached yet. Go to America, find out what you can, find the Ernie who left these shores in 1948, and when you've discovered all you can, if anything, come back here and we can open it together. Is that a fair deal?" It was. I agreed. We walked slowly back to the entrance to the church, and I was lost in thought. I promised him I would return, but only after I'd exhausted my search. He smiled again, charmness personified. Before I set off on the walk down the hill and back to the city centre, I asked just one question. "What did he look like? Ernie, what was he like?" Father Hayes paused for a few seconds before answering. "Like an old man. Nothing special. Just an old man." We both knew that that was a world away from the truth.